So the year is 1925, it's December, and you work for the B&O Railroad, and you live in Cumberland, Maryland. You walk outside your front door one morning, and you happen to notice the white stuff coming down. Snow, not asbestos. I can tell you one thing. When you gotta go to work, this is not gonna cut the mustard. But this guy behind me, X17, will. And boy, have we got a fun episode for you today.
Built by the Russell Snowplow Company in 1919, this is a fairly rare example of a double track snowplow.
And we'll get into that, what these meanings are, because we're going to use some terminology today, James and I, that you may not have heard before. But we're going to get you in, out, around this particular piece of equipment and show you just what it does and how it fought the snow in the Alleghanies. So stay tuned. This is Trevor.
And this is James.
For History on the Move. Get your favorite cup of, hopefully a warm beverage, because maybe it's cold when you're watching this. And stay tuned.
Alright, so we are standing here in front of the X17, and this right here is really the business end of the snowplow. This is the blade. So you can see it has this, it's mostly wooden, right? You can see multiple layers laminated up there. You need some good strength, right? Around here, we have this blade here, vertical, which channels the snow all to the right. Now that's what makes this distinctive as a double track snowplow, because if you have two tracks that are running next to each other, it's not going to do very well if you just send it to both sides, because you're going to send some off to the side and you're going to send some off onto the other track. So this will send, they'll go one way, it'll send all the snow off in one direction, go the other way, and it'll get all of that snow. So the construction of this is fairly simple, but it has these big, pretty substantial pieces of flat iron here. You can see that at the top of the snowplow and at the side there. So that's what's going to cut through the snow, and then this whole structure here is going to channel it away. And those have to be really strong, really reinforced, because that's what's directly hitting into the snow. At the front originally, there would have been a thick cast iron blade that would have cut through the snow and pushed it up. You see there's part of this here, and part of that blade it has been removed.
I think it's actually inside, and we'll probably see it when we go inside.
And, of course, in order to move your snowplow, sometimes you have to couple onto the front. So there's this hatch here. And behind that you have a simple chain link coupler. And you can see inside there, the whole construction of this car is just wood. Wow. And if you get a look inside here, you can see these are actually really, really substantial pieces of wood.
Do you think these are oak? Yeah,
these are probably oak or very dense pine. Strong wood, and you need that with the amount of, you can think about how heavy water is. Snow's just about as heavy as water. If you ever picked up a 5-gallon bucket of water, you know how heavy that water is. Moving along here, there's this skirting, which helps to, serves two purposes. It helps to direct the snow away from the vehicle and away from, importantly, the wheels and the trucks, which are potentially fragile, and if snow builds up in the flangeways, which we'll talk about later,
yes we will,
that can lead to derailments. So we have these skirts here which channel the snow away from the trucks. One thing that's important, these cars were built in the era before roller bearings, so they have plain journal boxes. And
what did Timken call them?
Friction bearings, which is slightly misleading.
It's a marketing tool, people.
We can see here and in front there are these hatches. These open up, they're chain closed right now, but these open up and allow you to get inside to the journal boxes of the cars. One thing that's interesting is because these cars had to deal with such heavy forces, And we can show this on the other side. The skirting's removed and it's exposed. The trucks actually have two sets of bearings. Most freight cars have bearings only on the outside, right? They only have a journal box on the outside. These actually have a journal box on the outside of the wheel, and another one on the inside of the wheel to make sure that the wheel's supported and stays, keeps this front truck from overheating, which in an era of a plain bearing, it's basically a box full of oily rags. And a hot box overheating will lead to that catching fire, which is not something you want to happen. That heat exponentially increases, and you can lead to seized axles, broken axles, all kinds of nastiness that you don't want. So moving backwards along here.
We should point out this yes. right here is not period correct.
No, that is not part of the historic fabric of the snowplow. You can see right here, this is one of the key components of a Russell snowplow. You can see it right here. Russell flanger. Now what a Russell flanger does is this is able to be moved by an air-powered cylinder up and down. There's a control for that inside the cabin of the snowplow, which we'll show you later. But what this does is it has these cutouts here. And those allow the flanger, it's a secondary blade, to get into the flanges of the rails and make sure that those are cleared out of snow and ice. Because if there's any snow or ice in there, it can lead to a derailment. Same reason that the front truck is guarded. Now, operating this was fully manual. There was no automation here. And we can talk about that a little bit more when we go inside. We can look at the controls. But it took a very skilled operator to run this. They had to know every inch of the railroad. They had to know, where crossings were, where switches were, that sort of thing.
Something that James, I'll interrupt here just for a second. Yeah. Something that James and I read, probably ad nauseum, multiple sources say that the people that operated these, the two-man crew that got to operate these, were always, most of the time, the most senior people on the railroad. And that was because, just for the reasons that James pointed out, that they knew where the crossings were. They knew, they had such a knowledge of that railroad that this thing was like an extension of them.
Yeah. Moving backwards, you can see, first thing I want to point out here is you can see these these cars were produced kind of in this changeover between from wooden-bodied cars to steel-bodied cars. And as such, these are really fairly conservative. And to me, I think they kind of represent really the pinnacle, at least structurally in terms of strength, of the wooden car. Typically, moving forward, cars would have steel bodies and they'd have one-piece cast trucks. These still have assembled arch bar trucks, right, with wooden centers, wooden bolsters, which is really a fairly conservative design. But they knew how to make it work, and they knew how to make it strong. And like I said, this is really, to me, the pinnacle of, this is the wooden car pushed in terms of structural rigidity, pushed as far as it can possibly go. Like I said, the bearings, there's bushings both on the inside of the wheel, inside there, and on the outside here. I don't know if that's the case. No, I can see it's not on the rear truck. On the front truck, we can point that out when we go around to the other side. But moving backwards, there's a couple things I'd like to point out. First off, the Russell snowplows had these very almost nautical round porthole windows. This wasn't really, I'm not sure that there was necessarily a reason for that. I can definitely say that it was very much just a defining characteristic of these plows.
If I could interject just for a second, there's something that James and I saw. I shared a photo with James of, as far as I know, the only, we'll call it the sister, one of the sisters to this. Let's get some better lighting. The X19, I think something that was really, that stood out to us is one, that is a better looking, we'll call it, version of X17. But you get to see, and I'll flash this on the screen while we're talking. James pointed out that you can see the handbrake on top, which it still has, and we'll show that to you in a minute. still has the handbrake on top, but it has this giant, I believe it was a steam locomotive headlight,
yes,
right?
That's correct.
And it had its own bell and
Its own whistle as well.
And we'll show you that.
We'll get into that in a minute.
That's pretty neat. But yeah, so X19 was actually based out of Kaiser. Not sure where 17 was based.
I'm not sure.
Yeah, but it was somewhere. We know it plowed hundreds of, God knows, tons of snow in the Alleghanies.
Yes.
So that's my little 2 pennies. So take it away, James.
I'd like to add another thing. And Trevor, I know you wanted to add something about some of the physics and some of the forces involved in this.
Yeah.
But this is something really interesting. So because of the weight and the forces that are acting on this car, the Russell Snowplow Company had what they called a power bar running all the way through the center of the car for the locomotive to push against. Now this is different from a typical car. A typical freight car, right here, you have your coupler and then you have your draft gear. And what your draft gear is essentially a giant shock absorber, a giant spring. So that means when a locomotive or a freight car couples against this, it can kind of absorb some of that shock and this can move back and forth. You can see that on this caboose here. You can see there's these pins and you can see where this can slide back and forth. Now, this is very different. If you look at the snowplow, this is rigidly attached. This is one solid casting that goes right onto the center beam of the frame. And you can see these huge wooden beams here. And the power bar is essentially just a giant, thick hunk of wood in the center, and then these big cast iron, or maybe not cast iron, but iron supports on either side of it. And that means that there's a tremendous amount of force acting on the snowplow. You have this tons and tons of snow pushing back against it on the front, and all of the force of the locomotive pushing it behind it from the rear.
Right.
And we'll discuss this a little bit more when we go inside, and you can see some of the tools and such that would have been required for this. These snowplows traveled around 25 to 40 miles an hour through just pushing straight into unplowed snow. And so that meant that there was just a tremendous amount of force working on these in order for the snow to really get pushed away from the track.
So it's a good time for us to talk a little bit about physics on these. So physics.
Yes.
Okay, so like James was saying, there's force. Force is, in this case, you have force. So let's go back up. This would be coupled to a locomotive. During its time, most likely a steam locomotive. And that steam locomotive has to produce enough kinetic energy to make it move, to then shove this at a sustained rate. Now, once, when the moving object hits at the time, a immovable object, otherwise known as the snow, you are now going to have another force acting upon the front of this. So for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction, and that's what happens. So remember, in this case, the locomotive, steam or diesel, doesn't matter, has to get up enough kinetic energy to where it can hit a stationary object, the snow. And remember, snow, if you've ever shoveled this stuff,
Heavy.
Very heavy. As over time you get more and more, and as it sinks to the bottom, it gets wet. That's that's the wet stuff. That's the nasty stuff, and that's why James is talking about that flanger, because that's where derailment's going to happen. It's going to happen obviously between the rails, and especially when you have stuff like, ice that has frozen, obviously, snow that's turned to ice and is frozen into place. So this is something we want to keep in mind, physics-wise, is, man, there's a whole lot of momentum, kinetic energy, and force going on whenever these things get up, to, like James said, 40, 50 miles an hour and just go wailing into a wall of snow.
So we are here looking at the front truck, and this is where some of that skirting has been removed. Now these trucks, like I said, are arch bar trucks. They're made up of multiple pieces of steel connected together. You can see there's these big bolts here, and these are just flat pieces of steel, and then there's a wooden bolster. And these trucks were actually banned from interchange service in, I believe, 1940.
1940, yes.
But obviously they persisted longer on maintenance of way equipment because that wasn't required to travel to other roads. That stayed on home turf, so to speak. One thing that's interesting about these, and I mentioned this earlier, is they actually have, and if we get the camera in here, we'll be able to see it. These actually have double wheel bearings. They have, most cars have a bushing or journal on the outside, but these also have one on the inside, and that just makes sure that everything is a little bit better supported against that weight and force of the snow. This also lets us get a little bit of a look at the brake rating inside there. And yeah, so these have these double boxes inside. That's a really unique feature of these cars. Not a lot of cars have those really heavy-duty trucks. Speaking of the brakes, these were originally built with a K brake, which had a combined main reservoir, which you can see here, and brake valve. These were converted in, I believe, 53 to have AB brakes, which were typical of a lot of freight equipment at the time. There's one last little thing that I think is kind of cool that I'd like to point out, and that is, if you look at these wheels, this is just kind of a neat little tidbit that I like.
Oh, what are we gonna see?
You can see Maryland, 1920. I want to say that says 1928.
Oh, I'm gonna have to twist the camera.
Not quite sure.
Yeah.
But
But it
Baltimore.
does say,
They were cast right here in Baltimore.
most likely right here at Mount Clair.
Yep. I think that's pretty cool.
So these are probably not the original wheels,
No.
obviously, because we all know, if you've watched this channel for any length of time, we've talked about this before, that wheel sets get changed
Yes.
out on cars throughout their entire lifespan. What comes from the factory does not stay there for the life of the car. So speaking of that, but not really, why don't we get you inside and we'll take a pretty good look, and we'll go through a little bit of history about the Russell Snowplow Company, as well as some of the really neat, we'll call them features of this car.
You can actually see right here, this is the original, I believe, cast iron blade for the snowplow. You can see that's pretty substantial piece of metal that's been removed, obviously, and set in here over time. You can also see the galvanized smokestack here for the coal stove.
So we'll get you inside and we'll take a look at the accoutrements that make this thing up.
So here we are, we're entering the snowplow here, and I have a light here that I can just kind of shine around and get a little bit better view of certain things.
A lot of better view. Look at that.
Look at that. So here we are. This is the interior of the snowplow. Obviously, the interior originally would not have also been the exterior, but you know.
Touche. We can't argue with that.
Time passes. Time passes.
Apparently, so does wood.
Yeah. So a couple things. I'd just like to start with, these snowplows would have operated in the winter. And before you have electric heaters, what do you have? Well, you have gas, and before that you have coal. So you can see right here, coal bunker.
And what is in there?
Coal.
Is it really?
Yeah.
It is. Look at here. Let me get my nits in here. Look at that. That's the real stove.
Yeah.
It's still there. I don't know if it's time period correct, but you know, it's still
bunker,
coal nonetheless.
Coal bunker. You see
the coal itself.
Yeah. Right here there would have been a coal stove.
And how can we tell?
We have
this fun matting that we're not going to mention what it's made of.
Yeah, some insulation material there. You can see, you know, windows and everything. Now, this is the heart of the beast right here. This is, if you know anything about air brake equipment, you'll recognize this. This is a brake cylinder, because this is what controls the flanger. There's a valve up there at the front, which we can take a look at in a minute, and that is what controls this. This moves up and down, and essentially is able to follow the track depending on how much air is provided to this cylinder. Now this runs off of the, Russell designed these to operate off of the train line, right? That's providing air brake to all the cars in the train. That would be generated from the compressor in the locomotive, which would be generally right behind this piece of equipment. One thing that I think is really interesting in the interior of this car is that there's a number of re-railing frogs. You see here, there's another one there.
I promise you, we did not lift these up and put them in
another one here. And those would have been absolutely essential for the operation of this piece of equipment, because there was a fairly high risk of this car derailing from the force pushing back of the snow. You know, if there was anything built up in the flangeways, it was really pushing into really virgin territory with in terms of the amount of snow. So it wasn't unheard of for these to derail. So it was really essential to have these re-railing frogs here. You can see moving through here, probably also in case of a derailment, the handbrake is easily accessible from inside the cabin. You can see that right here. You can see that ratcheting pawl there that runs down to the truck below the floor, as well as this is that power bar that I mentioned earlier, or as Russell called it, the power bar. It's really just the center sill of the car, but heavily reinforced. You can see these very substantial beams to the left and right of it.
Can we actually get a good view? I'm curious if we can shine the light this way. Can we? Oh, we can.
You see the wood.
Yeah, we get a good cross section here.
This heavy iron. It looks like channel stock on either side.
Yeah, you get a really good cross section in this view. I mean, it's sad that the floor is no moss, but it's a good view.
Moving forward, you can see a number of different things here. Most interestingly, probably, we have this air tank right here, and this is what would have. So you weren't depleting the main reservoir for your brakes. In order to feed the flanger, you have a separate air tank here, which would have contained air to power the flanger cylinder to move up and down. And this is the heart of the operation right here. See this lever has this little arrow on it that points up and down, which I think is a little bit charming. And this is what would have controlled via this valve, and these air passages would have controlled that flanger cylinder behind us. As any air cylinder needs, anything pneumatic, you need to know what your pressure is. You see there's a pressure gauge right here. That's actually fairly similar to a air brake pressure gauge. You can see you want it to be right about 90 right there.
If you had a needle.
Yes. You can see some other things. There are these windows up front, which you need to see where you're going. And really, you have a pretty good view. I mean, this is very much kind of following that nautical theme. It feels very much like the...
Are you the captain of the Titanic?
Very much like a captain of the... a captain... Or
not of the Titanic.
Maybe a fishing boat or something. But yeah, it definitely has... You have a very good view from right here. It very much feels like you're kind of at the helm of this thing. Speaking of being at the helm, before radios, it was absolutely necessary for signals to be communicated via whistle signals. So that's what's right here. You see there's this separate, there's a valve here, which is, I believe... Seized. But it goes to this air line, which goes outside this window here.
Oh.
And actually...
I can see it. There it is.
There would have been a whistle mounted here. And that's how the, before radios, the operator of this piece of equipment would have communicated with the engineer of the locomotive pushing.
Let's talk a little bit about the history of snowplows, or wedges, I think they were also called. and the Russell Company itself. So, to go back in time, necessity is always the mother of invention.
Yep.
But in 1840, the railroads had become, in the United States, to the point where they were able to now inhabit problems such as snow. Okay?
Yes.
They had generated such mileage that they were going, oh, crap, we've got this thing called snow we got to deal with. Well, how do you deal with snow? Well, if you're in the 1830s or 40s-ish, you would go get that thing at the beginning that I got tossed, right? Now, there's a guy by the name, Charles, I'm going to butcher it, so I'm going to drop it somewhere down here at the bottom. I'm going to butcher this poor guy's name. His name is Charles something or other.
French.
He is very French. I am apparently not. And so he actually invented the wedge. And I'll flash a photo up on the screen of what the wedge looks like. And so this is 1840. And now snowplows begin to evolve from this wedge. And the humble beginnings of the Russell car, originally it was just called Russell Snowplow Company, and then they became, I'm getting ahead of myself here, but so the year is 1890. Sources do vary, so this is part of history, but it's either somewhere between 1890 and 1893. J.H. and J.W. Russell, because everybody back then just used their initials, started this company called the Russell Snowplow Company. And the fascinating part is they were actually in Boston. The company was based out of Boston, Maine. And you could probably surmise that there's a lot of snow in Boston, Maine. Therefore, there's a lot of this coming in to buy their product. And eventually, the company moved later, and I'm blanking on what time frame, but they moved either I'll flash it up on the screen because I am drawing a blank, but it's either 1890s or early 1900s. They moved to Ridgeway, Pennsylvania, and that became their home base. And so at that point, J.H. and J.W. of Russell are no longer part of the company. And so the company goes from the Russell Snowplow Company to the Russell Car and Snowplow Company. And what's really neat, and James and I have done this a time or two in our lives, we've thumbed through old Railway Gazette magazines and Railway Age and the trade publications. Russell literally became the Kleenex for tissue paper. They were akin to that. So when people said, I need a Russell, they were talking about a snowplow. They were that well known because really they had some competition, but it really was not as mainstream because people need lots of locomotives, you need lots of hoppers and passenger cars, but this thing that we're standing in, you only need a few. And so Russell really took over that market, and sadly they went out of business. It's somewhere in the 50s. Again, sources vary on this. But the neat thing that reading about this really shows you that one company created such a great product that nobody ever needed. Like people would, send them into Russell to say, "Hey, can you reinvigorate, rebuild, redo my plow?" And they would go in there, and sometimes they would even update them from the wood, like to steel.
And it can often lead to a case in which cars which were originally built in the early 1900s are later rebuilt, in the 40s, 50s into these, more modern steel things. This one, I don't believe ever was rebuilt, although we don't really know. It could have been modified at some point. It could have been, but certainly it was not rebuilt into a steel-bodied car, as we can see behind us.
Now, to go back in the time machine real quick, the methodology behind the snowplow was it was a basic machine. So when you get to 1884, we get to the invention. It was invented by a different guy, but the guy that put it really into production, the rotary snowplow, was a guy named Orange Jules, I believe his name. I don't know what it is with these French inventing stuff for snow. I mean, it's not like they got a whole lot of it over there. But he came up with this, he really patented the idea and got it into mainstream thoroughfare in 1884. And now, at that time frame, right, so Russell and these rotary snowplows built by various companies were starting to compete.
Yes.
And eventually, the reason, let me say it like this, the reason why the B&O stuck with X17 and its brethren to push snow over the Alleghanies is mostly because the snow in the Alleghanies is not as bad as the Rockies, and if you head out, what's the one out in California where the snow shed
Sierra Nevada.
Sierra Nevadas with Southern Pacific.
And of course these, you know, snow was, it wouldn't be quite as frequent, it wouldn't be quite as heavy, so for more occasional usage, this would suffice just fine. If you look out west, you see, you know, the Rio Grande, you know, using these big, big rotary snowplows, and really there was no need for the B&O to maintain such a complex piece of machinery for the amount of snow that they were receiving.
Because the more moving parts, the more maintenance, and maintenance costs
money.
And what do railroads not like to spend?
Money.
Money. So it just made sense for the B&O to stick with this type of piece of equipment to fight the snow. So something that I want to bring up, and James does too. Yep. He's not held hostage, I promise you. That a neat piece of trivia is that the X17 is literally the only surviving original B&O snowplow in existence. And we have it right here at the museum. Now, sadly, it's not on display, but this has been documented multiple times, and this is just a one-of-a-kind piece of equipment. So something as a history major that I was always taught was cite your sources. So something that James and I do fairly frequently on this channel is exchange sources with each other. And we basically read the same stuff and then come to the conclusions, and then we film the episode. So for this particular episode, a really good, something that I found very helpful was a copy of the Sentinel, which is the monthly magazine, the bi-monthly magazine published by the B&O Railroad Historical Society. This particular one, the November-December 1992, has a great in-depth, the whole thing is literally nothing but snow plows and everything else. So if you can find this, wherever it is that you find your stuff, your railroad memorabilia, please pick that up. Something else that is available online, and I'll drop this in the description, is the Russell Snowplow catalog from, what is this, 1898. And this was really helpful for James and I to actually know intelligently what the heck we're talking about when it comes to this stuff. So there's also another book that I didn't use for this, but it's by Gerald M. Best, and I'll flash it up on the screen for you, just called simply Snowplow. And he talks more about the Sierra Nevadas and the Colorado, the Rockies and all that stuff. But it's still, if you just want to learn about this stuff in general, that's a great read. So again, get out there, look for this stuff. Sources are, be decisive in your sources.
So we hope you've enjoyed this tour of the B&O's X17 1919 Russell Snowplow.
This was really a hoot and a holler. For us to be able to go inside this thing, especially James getting to show you some of the neat mechanical prowess that this thing had. Very primitive for 1919. I find that really fascinating. This was all powered just by air.
It's simple, but it works.
Yes. And even on top of that, you got some really good history knowledge, and hopefully these you know, the two book recommendations that we gave you hopefully send you off into a good direction to find out more about not just B&O snowplows, but snow fighting gear really in general, because snow plows and snow thrower, all that good stuff, the big rotary plows, those are fun too. So for History on the Move, this is Trevor.
This is James.
And stay tuned. We got some really good episodes coming your way. Take care.